Yes, like you rightfully put it, Ayub, and as we eagerly wait to see what the report holds, that should be presented to the president tomorrow, and of course hitting the public scene on Wednesday. In what many people have disputed, of course, a report, there's been that argument on ground. Why is it that you dispute what you've not seen? So finally we get to see this. If it had delayed any longer, then it would mean constitutionally it would have not met the requirement of course, proceeding. So that probably they had to put that into consideration so that they're not late, and we eagerly wait to see what it holds. But then again, we also have, of course, recommendations that are going around in regards to what we would expect within the BBI. But the biggest question then, will it address the issues of common mwananchi? And that's what we'll be discussing this morning, even as we get to hear what my panel has to say on what they expect of the report. And I'm sure that's the first thing that we'll start with, in what would be their very own respective expectation to be addressed for that matter. I know there are a couple of things that we'd want as a country addressed, but of course they are key that you'd not wish as a person that of course they are left out. So that's what we're going to hear, even as we wait to see what will play out tomorrow upon that presentation of the report. And most importantly, we're having discussion as to the fact that this is a report opposed to it being a bill. So how quick can it get to the level of the parliament? How quick can it get out? And whether indeed it's going to propose a referendum. So joining me this morning, senior political analyst Benji Ndolo, thank you so much for your time.
Good morning, Linda. Thanks for having me.
Yes,
and you came with your own...
a name. Yes, well, interesting. Yeah, it's only fair and that we all get to enjoy this. It's a morning. I mean, we need to keep warm. And in a name that I always consider a tongue twister, Kabiria Bariu. I don't know, you really need to wing a bit so that you're able to say this. So at least you don't go wrong. Yeah. Political analyst, thank you so much for your time this morning. So and of course, with me, Ayub here, we're also expecting Kenneth Chesa, lecturer of law, University of Nairobi. Sorry, I don't know why I had to say United Nations and all that.
More interested maybe on the developments in New York.
In New York, yes, exactly. So welcome on board once again. And my first question then would be, what are you anticipating or what are you expecting that the BBI would address that are key in the country so that we're able to get this, of course, change that we all are eagerly waiting for or looking forward to as a people of Kenya?
What I expect the BBI to address?
Okay, well, the key one that you'd not expect to miss out on this. We say Tanga has its irreducible minimums. There are some people who argue that maybe we do not even need it because we already have the constitution.
What is Tanga in the first place?
Yeah.
I mean,
the functions, the opposition in government, like I would rightfully put it.
I just think that we have oversimplification of very serious issues as a country. I think you saw the illustration there by Ayub, the cartoon that shows the tree of the constitution drying up already. That's unfortunate to think that such a progressive, wholesome constitution 9 years later after being butchered and not adhered to is already being discarded for something else. And so for me, what does the BBI offer? Nothing much at all. I'm yet to read it, but what can the BBI offer on the backdrop of Constitution of Kenya 2010, Ndungu Land Report, and the TGRC report, which took a lot of time, which was very controversial. At some point, the chairman had to resign, the late Bethwell Kiplagat, which went round the country, whose contents have not been disclosed openly because obviously it's got very potent stuff. And so, Linda, on the backdrop of that, it's like saying, here's a Mercedes, here's a Volvo, here's a wheelbarrow. What do you think about the wheels of the wheelbarrow?
All right, TJRC, he brings it board, which is likely to loop in, of course, the key figure of the BBI task force as it stands today, that is Haji. I mean, what would you say then you expect amid all these keynote points that he has pinpointed?
Well, thank you so much for having me today. And let me start clearly that the BBI had 9-point agenda. And I'm sure that when they were going around collecting the views from various stakeholders, those are the things which they were really focusing on, from the national ethos to inclusivity and all that, those issues. But now, when it comes now to the expectation on tomorrow, BBI has taken more of a political angle than even now things which are citizens-driven. So I want to imagine that the committee for the BBI, apart from maybe being assumed it's independent or they collected independent views, they have some masters who are maybe trying to do like puppeteering and trying to say, now, this is the thing and this is the thing not to say, and this is the thing not to present. I'm saying this because even we've seen some people who are insiders of the government going around campaigning for BBI report, which is still not open.
Yes.
And you cannot say you oppose or you support something which you really don't know, meaning that there's some inside information which is already leaked out. And when information is leaked out, meaning that there's something which there's been a lot of manipulation. So first, my expectation would be, let the BBI be something which will strictly focus on the 9-point agenda as opposed now to the political space, whereby it's assumed they want to expand the executive just for the interest of few.
As we look at that, do you suppose it would surprise us positively?
Well, I know they will have some, both the positive and negative surprise, depending on which side of the political space you're aligned to.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you allow me to ask Kaberia a simple question?
Yes, please.
He talked about national ethos, inclusivity. Have you
Electoral
read
justice.
Yeah. Have you read Article 10 of the Constitution of Kenya?
Article 10 let me know what the Article 10 states. But
Article 10 basically talks about exactly what you've talked about.
Yeah.
And if maybe when we go to break, I'd be happy to open. I usually have.
I should be having it.
Yeah,
You know,
just if
yes.
you look at Article 10, it's exactly what he's talking about. And that's why, to me, this is a big
It's more or
fuss.
less
So
the same
in other
thing.
words, we have
By the way, it's a key pillar of the Constitution of Kenya.
We have outlined issues that are within the Constitution for a task force to undertake.
Absolutely. Article 10 is a key pillar, just as Chapter 6, etc.
The same reason as to why many Kenyans have been calling for the need for the full implementation of the Constitution instead of embarking on another political process. But let's hear from what the opposers or those who have been having the divergent view regarding the Building Bridges initiative. The task force and the principals have been saying over the weekend and last week regarding, of course, the laid out expectation of the BBI report, which is set to be handed over to the president and the opposition chief Raila Odinga tomorrow Tuesday.
Hiyo bluebird ibadilisha initiative. Hiyo hatutakubali.
Kwa hivyo hiyo story ya beba baba Ikulu nafikiri tutaiachia mahali huko.
Kama BBI haina kitu cha kusaidia Waturkana, Wapokot na other pastoralists, hatuoni, it is dead on arrival.
Wanataka Kenya mzima ifanye jukumu ya kubadilisha katiba ati ndio Raila Odinga afanywe prime minister wa Kenya.
Alafu watuambie hiyo ni watu wa Ndoma wameongea. Nyinyi mmeongea? So we want to tell them, even as you look at changes, they must reflect the wishes of the people of Kenya.
All right, those are some of the opposers to the Building Bridges initiative. And of course, from the onset, we have seen names coined out or crafted for that. More or less what the Member of Parliament for Kiharu constituency, Ndindi Nyoro, did say. Bendy, if I may come to you then, the date is set tomorrow. And then we have all these political developments that regard, of course, people being invited, especially the county commissioners and the chiefs, sending text messages to those who are supposed to be attending the Bomas. That is summit where the report will be made public. Is it a case of predictable solutions for unpredictable problems?
It's a case of governance the wrong way. It's a case of over-politicization of life in this country. We just came from a by-election in Kibra, which we discussed here last week and the week before, that seemed like a general election. If you look at the mobilization, if you look at the expenditure, some of it of public money and what have you. Now we want to go into something called BBI, leading into a referendum. And in a month, we're in the year 2020. So obviously, officially, campaigns for 2022 will begin one calendar year from next month. How can you build anything in a country, in any country, not just Kenya, with that kind of political climate? Allow me to just read here Article 10, which I was just telling the young man here. The national values and principles of governance in this article bind all state organs, state officers, public officers, and all persons whenever any of them apply or interpret the Constitution, enact, apply or interpret any law, make or implement public policy. The national values and principles of governance include 2A, patriotism, national unity, sharing and devolution of power, the rule of law and democracy, and participation of the people. B, human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusivity, inclusiveness, equality, human rights, non-discrimination, protection of the marginalized. C, good governance, integrity, transparency, and accountability. And D, sustainable development. It goes further at Article 11 into culture. You can see, and we've talked about this here before, Linda, and thank you, that was your phone we'll look at. You can see, and I've said it often because I work in policy and I look at data all the time. Not many leaders have even read the Constitution 9 years on. let alone experts like Kaberia. People have not read the Constitution and internalized it. So sometimes when you go to court, you will see a few judges or a few government functionaries, just a few, that always have a copy of the Constitution of their desk to reference back. I've advised many key figures in government, and many of them you find they try to have a team or themselves that reference back. It's astounding to me that people have not read the Constitution. That's why we're in the situation we're in today, where you have the kind of governor we have running Nairobi, where you have the kind of governor we have running Migori, where you have the kind of discussions that we have around. I looked at something called a corruption report tracker, and I'll share it with you in the course of this broadcast. It's amazing, Linda, that this country has not even shut down yet. The level of theft that you've seen discussions around the port last week. Everything is in the billions. How is BBI going to help that? Yet milk, farmers are selling milk at 17 shillings, retailing at 60 shillings. How is BBI going to help farmers?
A difference of about 43 shillings.
Exactly. So you're just increasing poverty and channeling resources to the top 1% elite, the owners of Kenya, so to speak.
So in that
and
regard,
always mobilizing and whipping and whipping and whipping people. And you know the funny thing, it's not that I mean to be too antagonistic or against this BBI, but you know the funny thing about the BBI concept, because I know it came from the Americans. A bridge is usually meant to connect, to bridge.
Yes.
So building bridges initiative is actually causing division. And in the broadcast, we'll go further into how this happened. But how the concept came about was, here are two protagonists, sons of the initial leaders of this country, Jaramogi's son and Jomo's son. Let's build a bridge. But where the miscalculation came is William Ruto, the deputy president, has also emerged now as a political force in Kenya. And as a matter of fact, why this is a malfunction of sorts is because William Ruto is actually quite popular in central Kenya, where the president comes from, where the youth are disillusioned and angry at President Uhuru for corruption, for lack of delivery of services, for such things as NYS, Youth Fund, and what have you. So in trying to create a bridge, Linda, we then went back into the same problem of now division, because you see, BBI is supposed to have everybody on board. How is it going to be taken if the rationale is that William Ruto, the deputy president, helped make Uhuru Kenyatta the president? And now this is a tool to block him. And I'm not here to argue for him, because William Ruto is his own worst enemy. He's done things himself that have ostracized him from many right-thinking Kenyans. The over-aggression, the theft, and what have you. And so, to me, this is like not a solution to anything. The solution, because you'll ask what's the solution therefore, the solution lies in implementation of Constitution 2010. And because President Uhuru was lucky enough to get to power without even strict adherence to such things as Chapter 6, he should have then gotten saved. Yeah, absolutely.
Fixed himself, all right.
And led the fight to implement the Constitution to the letter. Whether you're my brother, my friend, my mother, my anything.
that was from the onset in 2013.
From the onset in 2013, Uhuru would have been the best country, the best president this country ever had.
Okay, Kaberia, of course, Bariu.
Yes.
All right.
Just call him
Coming
Kabesh.
to you. Kaberia is much easier. Bariu is pretty much hard. When you listen to what Benji brings on board, you know, facts and figures placed on the table, and the fact that even before we have read the details of the BBI, of course, with all these leakages that we're talking about, there are highly likelihoods that, of course, it's going to be disputed. It's already being disputed as it is right now. What then are the likelihoods of it sailing through, looking at the fact that the people who are fronting it are key figures also politically, and they enjoy huge support? And in the event that it does, with all the flaws that we are talking about, what is left of us as a people of Kenya? Where will it place us?
Well, thank you so much. Let me start by thanking my senior brother here for the way he has been able to bring the facts and figures on the table. And as you're saying, that's now the right standing and the true standing of things as things are right now in Kenya. But now looking at the expectations and where the Kenyans stand, let's look at maybe what's happening right now. We have seen within government itself, there's a lot of opposition. He started by asking what is Tanga-Tanga, and the answer was Tanga-Tanga is now opposition within the government. And we've seen alignment already taking shape that we are not supporting BBI and we are supporting BBI. This is because of the article whereby it's assumed that there will be expansion of the executive to include the position of the Prime Minister. And that's what now is bringing the threat to the people who have presidential aspirations, specifically DP Ruto. Because when you look at what happened during the Grand Coalition, when you had the position of Prime Minister, when Raila Odinga was the Prime Minister, it was very a powerful key in the government. And at even some point, there was even conflict between the Prime Minister and the presidency. We heard of the Nusumkate, the Mkeka thing, the carpet thing, and all that. So there's that situation whereby there's no clear separation of power. And it's still assumed that whoever, if this is something which will be fronted, and the government has put a lot of machinery. When I talk of government, I mean the president and his men. We have seen Karanja Kibicho standing clearly and trying to bring in some intonation that is really against some candidates. And let me say William Ruto. So my thinking is that the government, there will be a lot of oppositions, and we have already started seeing it. One aligned to the DP Ruto, and the other one which is pro-Raila and the pro-Uhuru. But I want to say that this is coming at an interesting time when you're also thinking of the general elections in 2022. And we have heard that there will be probably so many alliances to include even the people like Musalia Mudavadi and Wetangula who are not really featured in this. So I think it's the high time that when the government, because as Ayub said, they have called the chiefs, the county commissioners, and all that, meaning that the government has put its ready machinery and all its armory to make sure that this is something which is going to be pushed to the throat of Kenyans, and it should even go as deep as all levels of grassroots.
Okay, having mentioned that, Benji, if I may come to you then, because there appears to be the need for, reconciling the country politically because of the 2017 elections. But what do you think informs the rationale that the two gentlemen, the principals here, are building a bridge where there seems to be no political river at all? And even from the onset, there were opposition. The idea was initially to bring the country, to galvanize the country, to bring some sense of cohesion. But we still are witnessing the divisions, but from the government's end. What are the assurances and the guarantees here that beyond 2022 and in 2022, that the BBI's recommendation for the political future of this country will be one that will end the uncertain times after every electoral cycle?
You see, when you talk about ethos, and when you talk about lack of adherence to the Constitution, when you talk about mobilization of county commissioners, etc., for me, the picture is so clear that we live in a country where people just don't understand democracy. People just don't understand progressive politics. Look at how the police force in this country operates. Look at the challenges that have been there against the position of county commissioners and even chiefs within the Constitution. So that when you talk about mobilizing government machinery to stuff things down the throat of Kenyans, that says a lot. And the fact that someone like Raila is somewhere in the matrix of that tells you that our entire top political class are really just cut from the same cloth. It's just a question of who is where when. It's the same people. There's really no difference between the ruling class or the government and those that aspire to be in the government. It's the exact same thing. And so you look at some of these machinations and you can see, first of all, the contempt for Kenyans, okay? Kenyans themselves have also not done themselves any favor because many are illiterate, many are gullible, ignorant, they haven't read the Constitution. And so it brings me to one of the questions that Ayub has asked is about cohesion. But how do you have cohesion in a country where you have no distribution of resources, you have no opportunities, and you have looting? How then can you have cohesion in a country where you're stealing and the national debt is growing because that is what you are stealing? It's a fallacy.
Okay. Well, on that note then, we hit the break. When we come back, We'll also hear from those MPs or members of parliament or lawmakers who are in support of the BBI, and equally continue with the discussion here on the roundtable before we also take a look at the developments and the crisis that continue to deepen in City Hall. That is Governor Mike Sonko's County 047, following the pressure issued on Thursday by leaders, members of parliament who are elected from across the 17 constituencies that make up the larger Nairobi County. The number is 0791478990. The hashtag on Twitter is NewDayKE. The short SMS code is 40920. We are coming back after the short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching the program. On to the second segment of New Day KE this Monday morning, 25th of November 2019. So before we get to Kaberia, of course, with regards to the topic at hand, and that is the Building Bridges initiative set to issue the report tomorrow, Tuesday, to President Kenyatta and the opposition chief Raila Odinga, we get first of all to hear from members of parliament in support of the initiative and who have been supporting the coming together of the president and the opposition chief ever since March 2018.
That they can bring it on Tuesday, and I assure you that as soon as I receive it, mimi nitasoma, lakini pia at the same time nitapatia all Kenyans, jameni tusome. This is an opportunity to engage in meaningful and peaceful discourse. Kwa hivyo hakuna haja ya matusi, sijui kama wale wanasema hawaitaki na hata hawajui nini iko ndani.
On Tuesday, 26th October or November 2019. These misrepresentations are designed to sow confusion and division among Kenyans at a time when there is a strong national consensus on the need for cohesion, honesty, and ambition to change our country for the better.
Lakini tangu handshake hii itimie na ifanyike, mnatembea Nairobi mpaka asubuhi, mnauza vitu vyenu vizuri.
Kama unafuati rais anasema aenda hivi, Raila anasema twende pamoja, let's build one Kenya, na wewe unatangatanga, my friend, kichwa yako lazima iko na shida kidogo.
All right, those in support of the Building Bridges initiative and President Kenyatta, who during a graduation ceremony on Friday did speak to the matter and said he will, just like any other Kenyan, read and then allow Kenyans to get a copy of the recommendations that will be brought forward by the task force chaired by Garissa Senator Yusuf Haji. Kaberi, if I may come to you before Linda poses the next question to Benji Ndolo. One of the pivotal issues that was at the center during the report compilation process of the task force was how to include, or how perhaps to star the TJRC report with the recommendations of the task force, enmeshing the two. And the TJRC, of course, handed over to the president in 2013. 6 years later, it's just gathering dust. No recommendations. Parliament never debated it in depth. And it does mention one of the task force chairperson, Yusuf Haji, adversely because of the gruesome nature of how the KANU government undertook its business during its 24-year tenure. Do you see some form of double standardness in this particular case? And with that regard, then, the TJRC adversely mentioned Yusuf Haji, the Garissa senator. Does it erode the morality here with regards to them now adopting the high moral ground? And will they have, perhaps after handing out the report, will they have the moral authority to tell Kenyans that we have found these other recommendations and this is how to get out of the current mess in the country?
Well, it's absolutely true that when the task force was being constituted, and even when you look at even the membership of the task force and what the people even were proposing the members, you can see it really took a political space, as I earlier said. But now looking at the truth, justice, and reconciliation, already it's not in public on the perpetrators. The people are really mentioned. And there's so many years down the line, more than 5 years down the line, the Kenyans do not know actually what's even the recommendation and how the implementation is being done. And the same case, and those are the same people who we have seen being even recycled now to this BBI task force, specifically like Yusuf Haji. He was adversely mentioned on the TJRC report, and now he's the one now coming now as the chairperson of the BBI to give now the proposals and all that to champion and say, this is now our findings. But now I see there is no double standard because having Yusuf Haji as the chair, and this is the same person who was mentioned under the 9-point agenda, we talked of things like the national ethos distribution of resources. This is like having a hyena now being a judge on on the matters concerning the sheep and the cattle, because we don't expect fairness, because these are the same people who are being accused, and these are the same people we're expecting solutions from them. So we cannot have solution from the problems. And this now, it means that it's something which we really need to look at very well, and the president should be able now to be able to look at those issues next time when even setting up such task forces.
All right, a clear indication that the people of Kenya are not sleeping in a clear way. We are able to note, of course, that these are the very same figures. And I don't know whether you guys were able to see that clip of oldies at some point in time, you know, that were challenging the likes of Murkomen and telling them that, you know what, enough is enough. We've voted for you people, but, you know, the heart is cutting across. Everyone who voted for you, whether good or bad, whatever it is, the tough times are mated upon every other Kenyan in equal measures or on equal measures. Do you suppose that we've learned, or maybe we are angered enough to a point where by then this is the time where we're going to stand and say that, you know what, we're not going to go by this, because then again it's not addressing our very own issues. Looking at the fact that, you know, we're that kind of a people whereby we're focused on matters tribe, we're focused on matters affiliation, we're focused on matters of how, of course, we're affiliated to this particular person, to this particular individual, and how much numbers they get to enjoy for us. Have Kenyans reached to that point whereby they can say enough is enough?
Linda, that's a good question. And what usually is required is a unique leader that is able to tap into that sentiment and harness it and provide leadership and direction. I often give the example that, you know, everything that can't be done is always done. And I remember in the early 90s, I was a young boy, and the whole discussion and the whole struggle for multipartyism was there. And my dad was a civil servant, and there was an assumption, a presumption that if you envisage or discuss the exit of KANU from power, you're wasting time, you're being dramatic, that it's not possible. As a matter of fact, and I give this example often, a man in Kitui was arrested in a bar, I think it was 1989, for saying, one day Kibaki ataongoza hii inchi. You know, that was like, Kibaki then wasn't a vice president. Yeah, right. That was like treason to say stuff like that. And he was locked up. If you look at the history, I don't know how much history Kaberia reads, but this is very interesting history of our own country.
In other words,
with names and events.
People never believed that KANU will at one point leave power.
Yeah.
Precisely. And now Kibaki is a retired president of many years. Moi, who nobody thought would leave power, is a retired president of many years. Anything that people think is very difficult is actually absolutely possible. I was looking at a video yesterday of how Trump became president. It's very interesting. And I don't support Trump, everybody knows that. But just to look at how he positioned himself and spoke to the issues and was able to undercut a lot of all the different underpinnings of race and what have you, somewhat in a negative fashion, and tap into that sentiment where people feel like the system is messed up, their voices don't count, they feel helpless, they feel angry. Just that was enough to propel him. And so the same thing can happen here in Kenya. And the whole thing of, you know, the tribal divisions are very, you know, they're very artificial and manufactured. And that, by the way, goes to the issue of expanding the executive to put in a prime minister. Kaberia, how does including a prime minister in Kenya today improve the cost of fuel or the cost of power? How? There's absolutely no reason, no sane argument as to how that happens. And again, we must remember that anywhere you have two centers of power, including in the so-called Nusumkate government, that was a very noisy arrangement, a mongrel, you know,
to pull the country out of the skirmishes.
Yes, and then a very noisy arrangement where the prime minister says this, the president says that, the president overturns or overrules him, and the only thing that would bring both sides of the cabinet together, Linda, was looting. So that when they're looting or increasing salaries, they're all in together as government. And the rest of the time, they're just bickering and arguing, and Kenyans lose.
But the uniqueness of a
is-
leader, allow me
this
to
is
just
terrible.
ask this, the uniqueness of a leader that you're talking about, do you suppose, or do you see this in any of the leaders that we have? Is it Ruto, who they're likelihoods that he's probably going to support the BBI despite the content?
That's a good question. For that political revolution to happen, for that movement to happen, the leader would have to be someone who has no links and no past with the status quo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because a lot of all the current leaders we have now themselves have their teething and their training and their upbringing in KANU. And so in actual fact, Raila included, he's a KANU former Secretary General. In actual fact, and these guys are all the past, completely.
So in other words, we're speaking about a politically polluted establishment.
Completely polluted. And actually why this is a good example I gave of Trump is because I was looking at, it's a fantastic documentary, and I'll make sure, actually I'll share it with you because it's on my phone. And when he announced, coming from New York into Washington, etc., there was collective laughter. And you can imagine,
And how President Obama bashed him during the dinner in White House.
I don't know how many of you guys have been to Washington, but Washington is highly political, more than Kenya. You have the K Street, the lobbying street. That's where a lot of the big-time lobbying is done. And these are people that are very well-educated, very polished. And so there was like collective laughter. In fact, it says how they viewed him as a cartoon. And this is a billionaire with his own building in downtown, gold-plated and all of that.
Trump Tower.
And his own Boeing 747 plane aircraft. But to them, he was just a collective joke to the Republican establishment, to the political establishment, and yet he was able to just keep going blunder after blunder, crisis after crisis, all the way to victory. And even till now, you can see how the establishment has fought him.
Yes.
But it's just interesting then to see that the important thing here is that it's someone who has no links. The only links Trump had was as a donor, mostly to Democrats and what have you. So he's not even a bona fide Republican. And so that is the most crucial ingredient, is that you've not served in government, you've not served in politics. William Ruto was in KANU. Uhuru Kenyatta, YK92. Uhuru Kenyatta was KANU chairman. Gideon Moi is KANU chairman.
And the father was
Kalonzo
the party
Musyoka
leader.
was deputy speaker, National Assembly.
Musalia
under
Mudavadi
KANU.
served in Moi cabinet.
Musalia Mudavadi was Moi's vice president.
And served in the cabinet. Well, a lot to speak
Was
to
it not the
because-
case? Was it not the case during the multi-party? That exit from, of course, single-party system, and of course to that point of multi-party.
Yeah, and you see, and Linda, this explains why, for some of these guys, and I've consulted with many of these leaders, and in a sense, it's like they hear what you're saying, but it's like kind of this distant, ideal, pie in the sky thing. Because for them, again, the way our politics is structured, the people are only good to be used and abused. They are only good for votes. I was actually through Kibra again last week on my way to Langata. And my lead there told me how, you know how these slums formed and expanded? Is politicians importing voters from rural areas. Kuja unipigie kura. And they get here, they have no education, they work as artisans, juakali, etc. And you live in poverty and squalor, and you really cannot go back because what is also there in the village, and everyone is looking at you in Nairobi.
Okay.
So just imagine that is the kind of setting within which, what can you get from that kind of setting?
Okay.
Absolutely nothing but poverty.
Let me get to Kaberia, because we'll be shortly joined equally by Kenneth Chesa, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi School of Law. And if I may come to you, Kaberia, as we usher in Kenneth Chesa, let me just take this a notch higher, because Ethiopia in 2020 will be facing an election, and the Prime Minister has decided to disband the ruling EPRDF party that was mainly an ethnic party of the Oromos, the Amharas, the Somalis, and the Tigray. And he said there's need for the national vision of the country to have that national discourse and create a party that will, in the future, address Ethiopia's deep-seated ethnic federalism. However, with regards to the Kenyan affair of the BBI, which is set to reconcile the country, look into the electoral issue, the national ethos, and bring together the deep divisions that normally punctuate the process after every electoral cycle, it seems that it's without one person who is the Deputy President, William Ruto. Number one, what do you think informed William Ruto missing from the mathematics? And then number two, was it the perception that because he was a hardliner? And how will they go to Kenyans amid hard economic times, the dire economic situation, and convince Kenyans that this will address the political problems in this country, and that going forward to 2022 and beyond, we are going to be having sane political environment after you people, the Kenyan people, are going to be voting?
Well, thank you so much, Ayub. First, let me take you back to history a little bit now and looking at this man, Ruto, and the way where he's come from in terms of the political alignment. And we've seen a very good trajectory growth of Ruto from the YK92 when he just was a young person and he started campaigning for President Moi. And we've seen him rise through the ranks and even getting a lot of favors from President Moi. And even now during the Grand Coalition, he was a very appointment to ODM. And now we've seen him now becoming the kingmaker when it came now to electing the President Uhuru Kenyatta, when we saw him from being in ICC and coming together and mobilizing all the votes from the Rift Valley and some other parts of the country. Now, the thing with Ruto is that he has not come from a well-known dynasty line. And there is no much history on where Ruto has come from in terms of the family association and all that. But now, at the place he is playing is in the table whereby the son of the first vice president and the son of the first president, and also then we have
first vice president.
Sorry, the first vice president, and also the first president. Yes, that's Kenyatta and Jaramogi. Yeah. And now on the other side, we are seeing also the Gideon fact that the son of the second president. But now looking at Ruto himself, is despite all that, the disadvantage of the background, is a strong politician who you can never ignore in terms of his charisma, in terms of the energy, in terms of even the strategy for politics. But now when you look at even the history, there is a very big tendency that those people who their fathers or their families have been in the leadership, they really want to continue that dynasty. So that's why Ruto is generally missing in the maths, because we've seen that these people, it's assumed the Uhuru and Raila, they have some other agreement whereby they really want to proceed with the dynasty, which was said by their fathers.
While he's missing on the math, he clearly is a part of it 101%, whichever way this goes. You know, if of course it sails through, equally it's going to alter his ambitions. If it does not sail through, equally it's going to alter his ambitions, because then there are likelihoods that the two are going to gang against him, you know, thinking that of course he's the main person who made this not to sail through. So where does it place him, of course, politically as it stands? And generally the people of Kenya, because then we all are eyeing at that particular one seat, and everyone is talking about, of course, inclusivity.
Well, let me tell you something, Lida, very interesting. You'll find out that, as my friend here saying that, things which are people really think they don't happen, these are the things which actually come to play. And now there's been a lot of assumption that the presidency always has really been very influential in determining who will take after. And now we saw that Uhuru, that's why you've heard some people saying that ukona deni yetu, you have a debt to pay because we supported you this time you are here now to pay the debt. But now we see that things are changing because there are various, you know, politics about interest. And to look at who will be able now to bring the interests of, let's say, your community, your people, and all that. And sometimes president does not even make decision by his own. You see that there are other business people, there are other influential people who are actually influencing the president, because they feel when this, either the Ruto takes over, there will be a lot of people will be insecure in terms of the investment and all that. So that's why you see there's a lot of alignment towards having him assigned. But now, with the alignment of the Tangatanga and Kieleweke we are seeing, it's clearly that between now the president himself, as we are saying, Ruto is part of that. It's just part of the presidency and the government at large. But now when it comes now to the politics and all that, it's now a totally different space.
All right, a different space altogether. We continue with this conversation. And officially we have another guest joining us, Ken Echesa, lecturer of law in the University of Nairobi. And of course, we also seek to hear his sentiments as regards to this particular issue that we are discussing this morning. But before we come to him...
Is he brother to the former minister?
I am not aware.
Let's spread a bit so at least we're able to figure. Are you?
I'm not aware.
Well, of course, well answered as a lecturer. But coming to you, exactly, we're discussing the BBI and the fact that it's going to be out tomorrow, presented to the president and later on to the public. In a culture where people are not fond of going through some of the details of these key, reports that that always determine what is left of us as a country, do you suppose then it was necessary for us to go that direction, or we could have as well implemented the constitution that we still do not even understand what details, it holds within? And what are the likelihoods then that the people of Kenya, who are considered to be the public, will go through this critically and make candid discussions in the event that it drives us to the ballot?
Thank you very much. My submission is that Kenyans are not likely to go through this document. Kenyans have a culture of not going through public documents. And as it is now, the major political players have taken position regarding the BBI. And therefore, if you are from Tanga, already the head of Tanga, the deputy president, has said BBI is a bad idea, which must be rejected.
Was it strategic for them to dilly-dally so that at least we also do not present, or they do not present Kenyans with enough time to be able to go through that?
What I'm thinking is that after BBI was leaked to the principals or presented to the principals before being taken to the public, the principals had issues, the two principals, President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. And therefore they took time to amend the BBI to fit their interests and present what will be acceptable to the people of Kenya. You saw the Central Kenya politicians telling Uhuru that if it is parliament electing president, count us out. Yes. And that is a risk that Kenyatta will not take. And therefore, Odinga also wanted some executive premier to come from parliament, hoping that perhaps he will have the numbers to become the first prime minister. So there was need for these two principles to sit with the document, suggest some major amendments, and then tell the group, return it back to us. In my opinion, that is what has been happening.
Okay, how about the security then, before we come to Benji? In the event, because at some point in the maiden months after the coming together of the two gentlemen, Paul Mwangi, the lawyer, said that in the event we hit a snag, we should not shy away from getting back to the principles for directions. What about the security of, the report here? Could the interest override perhaps what the team might have genuinely looked into in terms of what ails the country?
There is no genuineness in BBI or in any other political agenda in Kenya. It is a game of interests, and the interest will ultimately override what the people of Kenya would want to have.
Okay. In the event then politically, Central Kenya would not fancy a parliamentary system of governance, as is the case with the successful, nature of how it has happened in Japan or in Britain regarding the parliamentary systems of governance. Central Kenya doesn't want that because it will lose the political tyranny here in terms of the influence it has or the grip on the political establishment in the country. Raila Odinga, in the event, he wants a parliamentary system, and Central Kenya, the president backyard says no. With that regard, hapo hapana. What about the clash of interest here? Will it mark an end to the coming together of the two gentlemen, and what does it mean politically for the country?
I can tell you for free that the document which will be presented to His Excellency the President tomorrow and the Prime Minister is an agreeable document. Is a document that the two have seen. They are not going to get a strange document tomorrow. Forget about what President Kenyatta told us at Sagana, that he does not understand the contents of Building Bridges Initiative. He is fully aware, the Prime Minister is fully aware, and they are receiving that document knowing what they are receiving. And therefore, they've already agreed on it. It's up to the President to wipe Central Kenya into it, and the Prime Minister to wipe the rest of Kenya into it.
So nothing will be on the way of the two gentlemen?
Nothing will be on the way of the two gentlemen.
You know, I actually I like his honesty, Professor from University of Nairobi, Echesa. I'm just sitting here listening to you guys, and I said, let me pose this challenge on air, just so we can kind of all of us digest it. It's more of a philosophical question. And it's a question to him and also maybe to you, Ayub. I'm sitting here listening to both of you guys talking about the former Prime Minister in some sort of negotiation for interests with the President, negotiation for interest on a controversial document. Apparently it's being unveiled tomorrow, but they've already been pre-briefed. They know what the contents are. It puts us back into not only campaign mode, but also into division. And I'm just wondering, Raila Odinga sat with the President of Kenya on a similar process as Prime Minister 10 years ago to negotiate for what they called a piece of the cake, a piece of the pie, a piece of bread. And now sits again in the same position with the president of Kenya, who happens to be now the proverbial son of the former president. How does that, what's going on here? How does that sit with, is that normal? Is that proper? Is that ordinary? What do you think the real issue is? That we are in this never-ending vortex where Raila Odinga is an agitator for something and it just keeps going round in circles. I really honestly cannot believe that, you know, President Kibaki baptized President Uhuru.
In what way?
Baptized. His Uhuru's name is
yes.
No, his actual name.
His actual name.
Yeah, his actual name.
Because he was present during his birth.
Yes, he was present during his birth and baptized him. And what do you guys think, Prof, that, you know, Raila was in this whole sharing of power, conceptualizing power, etc., with PNU under Kibaki and now again under Uhuru. It just doesn't sit right with me at all. I don't know what you guys think.
Okay, before we come to Kaberia, you'll of course want to respond to that.
Yes.
Is Raila the constant or the variable factor politically in this case?
I think Raila has been a constant factor. And Raila has been successful in rallying Kenyans, or what we call the rest of Kenya, around his agenda. And this began in the year 2007 when it was said that there was no presidential winner. And at least a commission told us that there was no outright winner. All thing that we can all take home without arguing is that Kalonzo lost the 2007 elections. But as who won, we cannot be told who won this particular election. And that is where Raila reinvented himself and presented himself as a victim. And he has remained a victim to date. In every election, whether he loses or whether he wins or whether he is rigged out, he is able to come out as a victim to more than half of this nation. And therefore, when he makes a political statement, people have identified with his philosophy. They are looking at him as a man who has been sinned against more than what he has sinned. And because of Raila bringing himself out more of a movement or a philosophical object, most of Kenyans are unable to think beyond what Raila means and interrogate him. And some are senior professors, some are senior intellectuals who say that Raila is a victim. Raila has been robbed of victory more than enough times. And therefore, Raila's agenda is Kenya's agenda. From the day we made Raila agenda Kenya's agenda, we forgot about Raila's past. We forgot about Raila's sins. And that is why Kenyans of particular philosophy are able to do anything to push Raila's agenda. And two, it's only Raila who has been able to rally some form of agenda uniformly, even if he does not believe in it, and he has convinced Kenyans that he stands for reforms. When you interrogate that keenly, you may get otherwise, but he has been in position to tell Kenyans, look here, I am the best bet.
And they bet, and of course the bet is never sure. We take a breather, and we're coming back after this short break.
Welcome back. You're watching the program into the final segment of the program. Before we do that and take a look at Sonko's Nairobi City, the crisis in capital, the county and the capital crisis, you wanted to respond to the initial comments made by Kaberia.
Yes. Kaberia, with profound respect in his presentation, he has painted Ruto as the son of the poor, which you all agree. Ruto as being a victim of his background, which I want to fundamentally differ with. The problem with one William Ruto is that he entered Kenyan politics with the wrong philosophy of believing in money, that money can buy everything, which was a very wrong entry point. And even in the present day politics, when you are making a first debate into politics and you come with an imagination that money will buy everything, the electorate gets to form an opinion about you. Look at YK92 and the amount that William Ruto was contributing as at that time. That was what people are now contributing today. Look at William Ruto.
25 years later.
25 years later, he's still doing the same things. And as Raila will say, carrying money in sacks. All Kenyans are not in agreement with is William Ruto's philosophy. All of us are sons of the poor. We cannot say that the system is favoring dynasties. Raila's father, for your information, was one of the most powerful Kenyans at the time of independence. And Jaramogi was the first vice president. But his son has not been able to clean the seat. If the systems were to favor Raila Odinga, then Kibaki would have considered Raila for vice presidency. Kenyatta would have considered Jaramogi and retained him. Moi would have considered Raila. Raila was a Johnny Kamilet in 2002 when he came to Rock Kanu and live. Therefore, let us forget this philosophy of William Ruto being the son of the poor. And by the way, William Ruto is no longer the son of a poor man.
He's a rich
Okay,
man.
Kaberi, I'll come to you first after this, because we're turning our attention to Sonko's city crisis, and you can see how this is the Sunday edition of the Daily Nation, and his trademark Facebook live videos, the hashtag, the Twitter, and of course how the T-shirt is branded the Thug Life Public, and the Thug Life again, and these are pistols, and this is Bob Marley, and of course his bracelets made of gold. Okay. Frustrations and anger, the common currency of Nairobi residents. There are problems bedeviling Nairobi County, problems that date back to the April 2017 Jubilee Party primaries. On one hand, there is defiant Governor Mike Sonko, fueled by ambition to serve Nairobians, while on the left, according to him, are enemies of Sonko, who he says are the stumbling block to undertake his mandate. And while this happened, Eastern Central Africa's economic capital is at the center of political storm, often characterized by poor administrative policies. 27 months since the inception of the current regime led by Sonko, the richest county in the country seems holed up in previous problems. Many Nairobians say an administration in denial, corroded and corrupted by scrambling political elites. Does County 047 have the moral authority and purpose to others? And what went wrong and why?
Our governor inherited a lot of pending bills from the previous county government.
It is end of the year or almost end of the year, have a habit of intimidating the governor, blackmailing the governor with the aim of extorting him.
So Nairobi is very unique because of the debts that were there during the mayor's time.
You cannot operate city hall without teamwork. You must work together.
Gavana wa Nairobi awachane na vitu vinaitwa vipindilee, kwamba anapigana na makatels. Hakuna. Kama makatels zipo, extortion pia iwachwe.
Na City Hall ni nyumba ambaye ina kisirani zake. Sisi tumekuwa huko. Ni nyumba ambaye ina kisirani.
Kaberi, if I may come to you at the center. Mike Sonko, no substantive deputy governor, suspicions, and a very inhospitable working environment in City Hall, the big hall in City Hall, the capital crisis, and Nairobi being the Eastern Central Africa's economic power hub. Does it perhaps speak to an incapacitation of existing capacity to govern the country, the capital better than its current status?
Well, from what we've read and seen concerning Mike Sonko, I think most of us will agree with me that when I say that the style of leadership of Sonko is not actually like the best leadership style, which is full of intimidation. It has full of working as just a one-man show thing. Because what we have seen in the past is that Sonko is that person who has even been recording live the CECs and even the sum of staff and even the president himself. The other day we saw him walking through the think in Jogoo Road, and he forgot that he's the governor and he started taking photos of the garbage and posting them in Facebook, putting the blame on the person, the sub-counter admin for that area, which is something I think it's shooting himself on the foot, because this is a blame which Sonko should be taking. But now, on the other hand, I think there's something which, despite having said that his style of leadership is bad, there is something which I like about Sonko at some point. Sonko is one person who has really stood out on the matters of, let me say, corruption to some extent, to really fight the corrupt system. We have especially the matters on land grabbing. We have seen him come really in strong force to really protect the vulnerable, the poor who are being grabbed of their land. And really he has been able to reclaim most of the lost public land. But now on this matter whereby I can say that the county is even running on autopilot, as we've seen right now, there's no deputy governor, and most of these CECs and the chief officers, it's just running on, I think, 16 out of the possible 34, meaning that most of even the critical departments of counties are incapacitated. And the other day we saw that the Association of Architects, I think the quantity surveyors were complaining that there is a lot of delay for them to get approvals for the building, simply because almost all the department was sacked when there was the roof of the precious school fell. But now we saw Sonko is more of sometimes reactive than proactive, and we've seen he has not put up good structures and system to ensure that the county is able to run well with structures, and it's just something which he has been running county through the social media and through the phone calls and other intimidating tactics.
Benji, getting Sonko into power was a Jubilee affair. There was that dire need of ensuring that as Jubilee, holds a power at the national government, then it should be, of course, the party should be the government that is actually holding power at the level of Nairobi County, which holds, of course, is the capital. And right now, when things are falling apart, it's now about Sonko. It's a Sonko's affair. Why do you suppose then Jubilee is not joining in hands fully to address this issue? Or would we then say that all these gimmicks that we are seeing right now are, choreographed political schemes to oyster Sonko as it stands today? And if it is not the case, then we saw them trying to bring in some level of sanity on, of course, the changes within the cabinet, within, of course, Nairobi County. And why is it then it has become so hard for them to hit hard on Sonko, or to tell him that, you know what, you need to keep the house in order because things have suddenly fallen apart?
Things have fallen apart, Linda. Kenya certainly has a governance problem, a deep-rooted governance problem. And Nairobi, as the capital city county, the leading county, should be the leading county, has been very unlucky. Nairobi has been very unlucky right from the Kidero days. As the first governor of Nairobi, you know that Kidero should have been champion of devolution. It's a fair question to ask, in civilized societies, would Sonko be even a member of parliament? The answer is no. Is his name Sonko? The answer is no. Right. I mean, you can see the depth of depravity to which society is sinking. And yes, he's been a good activist for the voiceless as far as harassment of property goes, as far as land goes, etc. But if you read some of these reports and if you look at a lot of the evidence, you can see that he's also corrupt. Yes, that there's a lot of corruption in City Hall under him. Obviously, that's then obviously a big problem. Is a leader is stealing big and giving handouts to the poor. And for me, I see his long-term game as one where he'd like to be president of this republic. No one's talking about that. And the tactic is just to do it in a way where it happens so fast nobody sees it coming. But some of us can see it coming. And so it's really, really unfortunate, Linda, from the perspective of accountability, from the perspective of the definition of leadership and integrity as defined in the Constitution, from the aspect of how to mentor and inspire the youth. The youth are watching this governor as the example of, just how much it pays to be crazy. And there's also the allegations on drug dealing and what have you.
And the prison term.
And he himself has said he's an ex-convict. The ESCC is saying now that he should go back and finish his term. And one of the things that I cannot really go into here on this broadcast is apparently the reason there's no moves against him is because he's blackmailing the highest echelons of the party with different recordings and stuff that he has in his possession. So that is, the background and history of our top leadership. This explains why there's all this kind of catch and release, There's no decisive move against him. Otherwise, I think he would have already gone down as a governor. I think, in conclusion, that the solution might be to actually move to court and get a very strict interpretation, because this is no longer acceptable. It is no longer acceptable. What's happening in Nairobi, that commands 60% of Kenya's GDP, if you vis-a-vis even next door county like Machakos or Kiambu.
Or Kajiado.
Yeah, or Kajiado. And Kiambu right now, the governor himself was ousted. But I think we talked about this on the show here last week, that he's been heard in the last week saying that he's on the way back.
Yes.
Based on the BBI. So again, as Kaberia had said, no, it's Prof who had said, no real intention to do anything pro-mwananchi, pro-poor, pro-good governance. It's using political tools kufanya siasa ya kumalizana.
Okay.
And to do gimmicks and tricks and self-interest politics. So that if you're with BBI, like Anne Waiguru, then you're no longer corrupt. You're safe.
You're
You know, this is disgusting. This is unacceptable.
Okay.
It will never get us anywhere. And Professor, I hope you teach this to your students, because I was invited the other day and this is what I taught. The sum total of all these funny things we're talking about is what? Poverty. You go in the slums, you go in the rural areas, poverty is increasing because of ignorance brought about by lack of knowledge, lack of discernment, that breeds tribalism. So-and-so is a thief, but he's my tribe. So-and-so is a thief, tupatie mwizi wetu.
Okay.
He's eating on our behalf.
And you coalesce around that.
And you coalesce around that.
Okay.
I hope you're teaching that.
Okay. Of course it does. Kenneth Chesa. Yes. We have seen all this drama in City Hall. I mean, and this happens in Nairobi County, the richest county in the country. Swift question. How do we seal the big hole in City Hall?
One is to realize that Sonko is not above the law. Sonko is treating himself as though he is above the law in this country. Sonko is looking at himself as more executive than the national executive itself. Sonko is Nairobi's cartel number one. I want to differ with my brother Kaberia that Sonko is fighting any cartel. A cartel cannot fight a cartel. Yeah. Whatever public stance you see Sonko bringing about are just meant to hoodwink the public from the grave errors that he has committed. One, Mike Mbuvi Sonko was a bad choice for Nairobi. And I'm not afraid to say that Sonko was a political choice. Sonko was not an administrative choice. Yes, not a political choice of the Jubilee Party. Another president, and by the way, in all fairness, I have always believed that the president means well for this country. It's not that the people around the president are the worst of his enemies. The president had not intended, in my opinion, to have Nairobi under Sonko.
He wanted Peter Kenneth.
He wanted Peter Kenneth.
He wanted Peter Kenneth.
He did.
But what did William see in Peter Kenneth? William Ruto saw in Peter Kenneth a competitor in 2022 who will inherit the gamer mantle. And that is how we brought ourselves this mess in the name of Mike Sonko. There are people who say that ignorance is the only disease where the patient is fine while everybody else around the patient is sick. So Nairobi has a governor who, I'll quote unquote, is ignorant. And therefore, all of us, the residents of Nairobi, are benefiting from his administrative sickness.
He has exhibited unwavering support for President Uhuru Kenyatta for the longest of time as it stands. Do you suppose then this, in a way, is going to...
Is it genuine?
Is it also going to prepare a safe haven for him where, of course, it's hard to actually hard hit on him?
It is, that is, I think, is not genuine, is public relations. And nowadays, I've learned to take, when I want to read Uhuru Kenyatta's lips, I just listen to what Karanja Kibicho and Maina Kamanda say regarding a person. And so long as Maina Kamanda and Karanja Kibicho have no time for Sonko, therefore the presidency has no time for Sonko.
Okay. But equally, he is a byproduct of democracy, isn't it?
And as he has said, Benjamin has said, actually Sonko, you know, Sonko is one man who records everything. You never know what Sonko might have discussed with Kenya's top executive. And therefore, they're being blackmailed that if we deal with him, Sonko
will
was
lick
very
these
out.
out.
Okay.
But if I were the president, you know the government has all instruments of violence and intelligence. They can confiscate Sonko's everything and deal with him and save this city. We cannot be living under some administrative mystery just because someone is blackmailing
Will
the
that
nation.
not equate to undermining the vote of the many, Kenyans or Nairobians who proceeded to vote him?
There comes a time, I think, when the minority have to save the majority.
Okay.
If the majority are not aware that they are under attack.
They're under, okay. Well,
That's a good point. The lecturer has done very well. And let me give one example I always give. There was a big push by President Bush to mainstream democracy in
America.
No, in abroad, in Palestine, in the Gaza, West Bank area, etc. And when they held the first elections in decades, guess who got elected? Hamas, a terrorist organization.
yeah.
Democracy is not pure, and nothing exists in a vacuum. That, the people can also elect a thug, and that's their right, but it doesn't make it right. They can elect a thug, and that's their right, but it doesn't make it right.
Okay, but the West equally abandoned, if I may come to, before I come to Kaveria, the elections of Mohamed Morsi in 2013, before he was deposed in 2013, he was elected in 2012. He was deposed, and there was no statement issued by Washington either until he died in a prison when the military took over.
That tells you that there are issues around his candidature and stature. I don't know much about Morsi. I know that Mubarak should have gone. I saw the revolution. I expected Mubarak to announce his resignation. He didn't. Isn't he in jail as well, Mubarak?
He's now more or less acquitted.
Acquitted.
Yeah. Oh, acquitted, yeah, but he was in jail for a long time. And then Morsi came. But I think behind Morsi were some of these, once again.
Yeah, the deep state.
Terrorist-leaning organizations.
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood much and the previous
exactly.
administrations were labeled that way.
Exactly, yeah. And sometimes it's a label because the ANC was also labeled a terrorist organization.
Yeah. Same as Jomo Kenyatta, by the way.
Exactly, yeah. And so, these things are not simple. They are a little complicated. But the fact then that there's a perception that the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization and is the force behind this then hurt his legitimacy, saw him gone into trial, ultimately deposed and died in a very short span of 5-6 years.
Yes.
Yes, Kaberia.
Yes. Sonko's, by the way, I want to ask you this. In as much as you argue that in a way he's done something, do you suppose Sonko's end is nigh?
Pardon?
Do you suppose his end is nigh?
Well, yes, I think that's true because
what would be the impact in this, short, of course, period that is left up until we go for another election?
Well, I think one thing which even the party itself, like the Jubilee Party, should come strongly is for Nairobi County to have a deputy governor. Because what we've seen from Sonko is just something like theatrics and the public relations. As he said, when he started by even nominating Miguna, he clearly knew that that's something which should not sail through. And now we're seeing that Sonko is really running the Nairobi as a one-man show. And as he said, there comes a time when even you don't need to look at even the democracy, because sometimes the majority are not always right. And it's something which you have even read in literature, that sometimes the majority cannot be right.
Even in the case of Jesus, the majority was not right.
Exactly.
Because they crucified him.
They crucified him. So I think the high time that we really need to have a strong force from the president. But I've really seen it coming because we've seen a lot of even attacks and all that on Mike Sonko, which is something even, I think it's meant to calm him down so that he can be able to see that things are not moving on the right way. But now the party should come and make even an executive decision that Mike Sonko should have a deputy, and this is the way just to do, because it's just ruining the name for the party itself, and even it's making city run just like a normal slum.
I think Raphael Tuju, for the sake of this country, for God's sake, really, Raphael Tuju should just take decisive action as he did last week on the issue of Majority Leader Guyo.
Nairobi,
and he should just sit and have a quick meeting at State House and issue a circular and a directive appointing someone like Peter Kenneth as deputy governor. Why? So that you have the governor running and doing all these things, but you have someone sober with a semblance of leadership and a direction that can actually run the county. It's not that difficult because you're talking about garbage collection, accountability of the for the money that is collected, and implementation of the agenda. Someone like PK obviously can do that. What do you think, Mwalim?
That is okay, and actually, as you say, the party has the machinery to do this. Though the law may not allow them to appoint, but they have techniques they could employ. They could use their numbers in the assembly to even impeach Sonko. And
That's
they could
true.
use the numbers in the Senate to confirm the impeachment and then save Nairobi.
That is true.
And I think I'm informed by my conscience that if Sonko does not change, this is the direction we are going. By recalling Elachi, the state or the Jubilee Party is preparing itself not to create a vacuum in case Sonko is either taken to jail or impeached. You know why Sonko never wanted Elachi or the speaker, substantive speaker? It's because the law says when the governor is not there, the DG takes over. If the DG is not there, the speaker takes over. If the speaker is not there, the law was silent. So Sonko was very sure that it is him.
So how was he convinced to bring back the speaker? I wonder.
He was not convinced.
He was not convinced.
He was not convinced to work the speaker.
Yeah, he
Those
was
are
not.
the state interests.
We all wake up to that.
Despite Elachi.
Yes.
By the way, Elachi was brought back by ODM MCS.
Yeah, I saw that.
Hugely.
Despite her announcing some form of reconciliation, also a ceasefire with Governor Mike Sonko, because it had during her impeachment in September 2018, majority of the MCS who impeached her were also allied to Governor Sonko. Yes,
is that then to say that in the event that Jubilee takes this direction that is proposed by Benji here, of course bringing on board another deputy, it still would not work? Because then if we go back to what played out with Polycarp Igathe, a clear indication that Sonko would not allow him to do some of the things that we would expect him to do, on an elite background. So on this note, would it be hard for
The reason I proposed Honorable Kenneth is because he's a veteran politician.
Okay.
Polycarp Igathe was a political novice.
Yes.
So who came from corporate, just two small clashes, he ran. Peter Kenneth would be able to deal with that politically. I mean, given his own experience in, as a successful member of parliament, as a presidential contender.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why
Assistant
is it
Minister
taking them
for
long?
planning.
Okay, why is it now taking so much time for them to do this? Is it because then there's that fear that this would come out as though it's a political witch hunt, and now they're trying to find approaches that would sanitize their move?
I think the onus also is on honorable. And for me, I'm a governance consultant, so I give solutions, I give analysis. I think the issue here is that there are issues that need to be straightened out between Honorable Peter Kenneth and His Excellency the President. Old issues that really should matter now. And it's really for them to swallow their pride and agree to work together in a way that is non-threatening to the Deputy President. This is possible. This is possible. After all, Muranga is one of the bastions of Ruto, and that is most antagonistic to the president, Muranga. And so, for the sake of Nairobi, I mean, you cannot have this kind of paralysis, and you have a guy just sitting at home or wherever.
From Mau, that is in Machakos County, to administer Nairobi County.
That's the thing. And even when he can't administer, you then have a situation where the county is like not governed. And when governed, it's misgoverned. And so the solution has to be, for the sake of the county, just agree on, who you want to come in and how and why, and make it happen. But I think also there's so much antagonism between the former Gatanga MP and Mike Sonko. But all of this can be fixed. And the president himself is who can fix this. For the sake, again, of the county. Why this is not happening, I just don't understand.
Or better say, there are other numerous, Kenyans who are well positioned to take up the
They're not. The thing is, like which ones? Give me a. So I've given an example. Give me an example.
Now there's a question, because then we cannot be here fronting for one particular figure. I mean, every other time.
The only Kenyan who is not competent enough to be Nairobi governor is Mike Sonko, because he has demonstrated.
Every other, yes.
The rest
we cannot wish out the rest.
Yes. Yeah, but from a pragmatic standpoint, that's the way to go for Jubilee. And for me, again, I stand by my words. Nobody has sent me to say what I'm saying. I do this every week, every broadcast, also on social media. Many times you have to think, you have to put the country first. You have to put the interests of, again, because of the issue of poverty and the rising national debt. How are we going to pay this debt, guys?
And the problem is investor fear, because they see the capital. I mean, that is the capital in crisis. And this, again, Kaberia, might scare off, isn't it, the investors? And amid, of course, the capital flight from the Kenyan market to heaven destinations like in Rwanda and Ethiopia, which are quite
In London
welcoming and
even.
hospitable.
Exactly,
All
yeah.
that subject to discussion some other time. I believe time is not on our side again.
Yeah, but Alfred, by the way,
Julius.
Alfred on Twitter at Alfu_254 says, hey, Benji Dollar, I'm watching the show on Ebru. When you said, have you guys been to DC? I felt that. I can only hope I will answer that to the affirmative someday. And my response is, your dreams are valid. But you must thank all the people that are watching.
Yes, indeed. And also now that it's a thanking session, we also have someone who just sent in a message, didn't tell me their name, but says, nice show right there, and says special greetings to you. You've been their mentor. Of course, we'll get to know who they are as we proceed with the program. Otherwise,
Is it a lady or a guy?
Now, that's another question that we're waiting to see.
There are mentors, ladies in this.
We should start fearing him.
Yeah.
Shek, let's wind up then.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Benji,
Thank you for having us.
and
Asante.
Ken Echesa.
Yes, sir.
And we'll leave our audience with the cartoon edition of today's Star newspaper that pertains the crisis in the capital.